There's this saying in pro-Palestinian activist circles: one day, everyone will have always been against this. For the British Labour Party, after nearly 2 years of backing a genocide, today, it appears, is that day. Here's Emily Thornbury.
I find it really distressing, profoundly distressing, to see what's going on and to feel a rage about it. That how can we be allowing this to happen? This weekend, please, Donald Trump, pick up the phone to Netanyahu and say, we have to let food get in.
But if we're serious about peace and justice, we can't allow these politicians to pretend that they were always against this. Indeed, they're still arming, training, and hosting the IDF while refusing to even recognise a Palestinian state. It's far from clear that they really oppose this genocide today. They need to be held account, driven from power, and in some cases tried for war crimes. Let's start by reminding Thornbury what she said when there was actually still hope that we could have stopped this.
What is simple is that whatever actions are taken by a democracy, it has to be done in accordance with international law. And we have heard tonight from the President of the United States that he has been on the phone to Netanyahu, and both of them have agreed that democracies need to act in accordance with international law.
Pause there, if I may. Do you think cutting off food, water and electricity is within international law?
I think that Israel has an absolute right to defend itself against terrorism.
That's not the question I asked.
It is an answer to the question that you've asked, and I think it's an appropriate one at this time.
Why won't you answer whether you think it's in line with international law or not?
Because I've tried to answer, and I've tried to say that we've already heard from your previous guest about what might be happening on a day-to-day basis. So we're now on day 4. And so we hear that there are troops massing on the border. There may well be an incursion. Immediately before an incursion, then, as the permanent representative have said, that it might be appropriate in those circumstances for there to be the sort of action that we've heard about. And then the invasion afterwards. I don't know, because at the moment we're in the middle of a hot war, and Israel is in the middle of defending itself, and we have to stand with Israel, just like we would expect people to stand with us if we were the victims of terrorism as well.
It wasn't just Thornbury who said this. Labour's pro-war crime stance came from the very top of the party.
I'm very clear. Israel does have that right to defend herself, and Hamas bears responsibility.
A siege is appropriate? Cutting off power, cutting off water?
Well, I think that Israel does have that right. It is an ongoing situation. Obviously, everything should be done within international law, but I don't want to step away from the sort of core principles that Israel has a right to defend herself and Hamas bears responsibility.
Starmer later claimed that he'd misspoken. This was not a plausible claim. He'd been given the opportunity to correct the record and had pointedly refused to do so.
Keir Starmer, you've said that Israel has the right to defend itself. Does that include cutting off food, water, power to Gaza?
Well, what we've seen is appalling and shocking acts of terrorism, the murder of men, women, children, by Hamas. And so responsibility lies with Hamas, and Israel has the right to defend herself and take action in relation to the ongoing hostage situation. Obviously, this is within the framework of international law.
But does that include cutting off food, water, fuel to Gaza, where, as we know, hundreds of thousands of civilians are living?
I think that international law matters and everything should be done in accordance with international law. But I don't think that we should deflect from the fact that the aggressor here, the terrorist acts, are those of Hamas, and they bear responsibility for what is happening, the awful scenes that we're seeing in the last few days.
If he misspoke, why did his ministers go on TV and defend what he said? Here's Lisa Nandy and then David Lammy.
Do you think Israel breached international law by cutting off water and power supplies?
Look, I think this is an extraordinarily complex and fast-moving situation. There are 200 hostages.
And what's the answer to the question?
Well, look, Israel has the right to self-defence, and it has a duty to secure the release of its hostages.
Sure. But my question
was, ensure that international law is upheld.
Right, and so my question is, do you think Israel has breached international humanitarian law by cutting off water and fuel supplies?
Well, in the last 24 hours, we've seen water, medicine and food enter Gaza. It is in very limited supply at the moment, but I am hopeful that we'll be able to amplify and scale up those efforts urgently. There is a very small window in which an Israeli government that is responding to fear and pain in Israel, and the Egyptian government as well, who have serious concerns about the opening of the Rafah crossing, may be persuaded, with the help of the United States and others, to not just allow aid into Gaza, but to allow safe passage through Gaza to reach people in the north. And that's what we've got to focus on.
I am going to ask the question again. Do you think Israel breached international law by cutting off power and water supplies?
Look, I'm not going to sit in your studio and grandstand and tell you that I'm going to make big pronouncements about what Israel is and isn't doing in what is a very complex, difficult situation.
The Human Rights Commissioner says the imposition of sieges that endanger the lives of civilians is prohibited under international humanitarian law. Keir Starmer, your leader, a human rights lawyer, says Israel does have the right to impose a siege. Who is right?
In situations of war, where there are allegations of war crimes, that must ultimately be a matter for the UN and its agencies and for the ICC. No. I'm sorry, Victoria, that is the case. This is not a moment for me to pass judgment about whether I'm not here as a lawyer.
War crimes, and neither was the UN Human Rights Commissioner. He was saying it's breaking international law to impose a siege.
He's entitled to his view.
It's not a view. It's not just plucked an opinion out of the air. He's looking at the framework, the Geneva Conventions. He says the imposition of sieges, which endangers the lives of civilians, is prohibited under international humanitarian law. Keir Starmer says Israel has a right to impose a siege.
Who
is right?
Keir Starmer has said right from the beginning that any war, it's important that democracies uphold the rules-based order and that must be within international law.
And
He's said that from the beginning. His statement today says that people should have access. And I have said to you, Victoria, I'm not here as an international lawyer. That is a determination of the UN and its agencies and the ICC. It's not a determination for me. But of course I hear what people are saying and their concerns about civilian casualties in Gaza.
So what's more plausible? A self-styled forensic human rights lawyer misspoke and then left the record uncorrected for over a week while his colleagues backed him up? Or he wanted to look tough in front of the bloodthirsty British press and is now gradually softening his position as public opinion turns against Israeli violence and gaslighting us while he does it, saying he misspoke. Here's another example of Labour's appalling treatment of Palestinians. Ubaba Khalid was a Labour member. She resigned from her role as Young Labour's Black, Asian and minority ethnic officer due to Thornbury and Starmer's horrendous statements. Days later, Israel killed 4 of Khalid's family members. The day after that, an anonymous Labour source briefed that those quitting the party over this issue were, quote, fleas. Yvette Cooper said this comment, quote, did not come from anyone in the Labour leadership, which suggests that she knows where it came from. Nobody has been disciplined for the comment. Another Labour source briefed around the same time that the crisis was an opportunity to, quote, put the socialists right back in the box where they belong. The genocide in Gaza is arguably the biggest foreign policy crisis of the century. Yet, these selfish parochial freaks see it just as they see everything else, as an opportunity to settle internal scores and beat up on the left. Here's our Prime Minister doing just that.
My sister was a... I think
This guy's obviously got a pass from the 2019 conference. We changed the party.
This lot will never deliver peace and justice anywhere, let alone Palestine. They need to go.